There we go. Okay. Welcome to Parent Conversations. We have Michelle with Epik Deliberate Digital with us again. Today, her subject is productivity, honoring time. I'm really looking forward to this because I think like many of you, I kind of get sucked in and all of a sudden an hour's gone and I didn't get anything that I intended to get done. So I'm hoping to talk a lot about that. Parent Conversations, it's made possible through grants from Bear River Health Department, Davis County Health Department, and the Central Utah Public Health Departments. And we always want to give a big thank you to them. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to raise your hand or put it in the chat, and periodically Michelle or I will stop and read those. Michelle, it's all you. Take it on over.
All right, thank you. There's always a strange kind of order of things here. It seems like each time with Zoom, I have a little different experience getting things going.
Sometimes I have to retrain myself with various technologies too.
Okay. Oh, Shirley's here.
That's just me using,
that's you. Okay.
Using our account, our Zoom account. So I look like her today.
And Linda, we're so glad you're here with us. As new people join, because I often can't, because what I'm sharing the screen, I often can't see. So as new people join, can you give them a welcome so I know that they're here?
I can do that.
Okay. As Megan mentioned, we are talking about honoring time today. In the Digital Wellness Institute's wheel and their survey, they call this productivity, but we wanted to bring a little bit more of that centered use of our time. So that's why we talk about honoring time. It's not just about to-dos and getting things done, and we'll cover more of that as we go along today. But as always, we'll start with an outline. I'll just go over this briefly. We'll start with a check-in and today's topic, and with a question on how you define and measure productivity. And then we have two sections today of, we're just sharing a lot of tips and ideas, honoring time by working from the inside out, and then by identifying and reducing distractions. And then we'll share our invitations for the week. This slide deck will come with a bunch of bonus material as well that we won't review during this conversation, but that will come with the slide deck that Megan will share out. As always, we invite you to have a paper and writing utensil ready for any of the thought activities that we have, and also just to write down any thoughts you have. And as always, we begin with the check-in. This may seem a little repetitive, but that is on purpose, because the ability to stop and check in to what's going on in our internal weather is so essential to digital wellness. And so we've built this into the process every week. So I invite you today at this very moment to consider 3 words that describe how you are feeling. That can be mentally, physically, emotionally, any kind of part of your being. And in fact, today I'm going to ask 1 or 2 of you if you'd like to share one of the things that you're writing down. How are you feeling today?
I can share a little bit.
Okay.
I'm excited yet a little apprehensive because my list of things to do every day is so long, and I'm always afraid I'm never going to get enough done.
Thank you actually for opening up about that, because that is one of the most common emotions that people feel when they start their day, at least according to what we learned in our course, that there's never enough time, never enough time, never enough time. I hope that by the end of this, maybe you'll have some ideas that I'll be interested to see your thoughts by the end, if you have some new ideas about perhaps how to approach this. Anyone else?
I'll share. I'm excited
Thanks,
and
Linda.
happy to be here because I'm really liking this course. So I'm hoping it can give me some tips of how I can be more productive.
Well, we're happy that you're here too. Thank you for sharing. The second part of the check-in is, as always, reflecting back on where we've been. Last week, we talked about physical wellness and invited you to try one new physical wellness practice or to share and discuss one physical wellness concept with someone else. And just as a reminder, we covered a lot. We covered physical safety and alertness to our environment, being present in our environment, and how digital tools can sometimes get in the way of that. Reframing or I'm having a hard time talking today. Reframing or befriending stress, sleep hygiene, overwork versus taking breaks, drinking more water, physical tension and where we feel that, how we can relieve it with stretches and meditation, screen-free meals, eye strain, ergonomics. Did anybody have an experience experimenting with something new last week that they'd like to share?
Well, this isn't really new, but I like the suggestion about drinking more water. I drink a lot of water during the day, and that forces me to take a lot of breaks. So I hadn't thought about it, but because we talked about it last week, I've been conscious of it for the last 7 days.
That's awesome. So do you feel like you had a little bit more of a connection with the idea that, hey, this isn't just good for my body for the water part, but the breaks part, like was your mind there with breaks more than usual?
Yeah, actually it was. I look forward to those little mental and physical breaks. I found myself looking forward to them a little bit more. Oops.
That's awesome. Thank you for the reminder. I'm going to turn my phone off as
I mute
well.
myself. Hang on just a second. Sorry.
No, that's okay. This is the life we live.
Michelle, I'll add something. And by the way, welcome,
Thanks.
Catherine Ellis. We're glad to have you joining us today too. We're checking in right now on what we did last week. I had a really interesting experience just last night and this morning with that concept of stress. And boy, last night when I was going to bed, I couldn't sleep for hours, it felt like, because of some stress. And this morning, thinking about that, and I remembered what we learned about making stress our friend. I ended up doing something we talked about before about identifying what our values are and how we want to show up in the world. And I made a connection, and this has been an ongoing issue that I've had, where all of a sudden I've seen myself in a new way and what I could do to change, not getting overwhelmed and ornery and angry about things, but I could feel more stable in my own life. So it was kind of a combination of what we have been learning over the course.
That's awesome. And a really great entree into today's topic.
Before you move on, I don't know if you saw Catherine join us, and I must apologize again for my phone ringing. I couldn't even find the mute button on it fast enough.
Yes, welcome, Catherine. We're so glad you're here. Kevin, when we have a discussion, I may pull back away from the screen share because I like to see your faces. This week, we're going to be talking about productivity. Like I said, that's how it shows up on the Digital Wellness Survey. And once again, encourage you to take that survey if you haven't yet. We are framing this as honoring time because it is so connected. Everything in this model that we have is connected to our core values. We're going to be bringing that up again today in a very specific way. As an overview of the topics, we're on topic 4. Can you believe it? We're almost halfway done with this series. We've covered Start Your Center, mental and physical wellness. And next week, we'll cover relationships and then well-being and digital citizenship. And that covers the topics on the survey. And then we have a bonus topic for the last week on media literacy. And we try to bring media literacy through the course as well. Just as a reminder, this is very relevant. There is a lot of overlap in the topics. We covered during the mental health week the reality that our brains are easily distracted. We talked about the mirror presence phenomenon, which will come up again today. The reality of cognitive load, that we just can't do multiple cognitive heavy tasks at the same time without mental capacity and degrading and quality of our work going down and stress increasing. And residual attention, if you can recall that math problem, that as we switch tasks, it can take anywhere from 70 seconds to, they say even 25 minutes to recenter. So our brains don't do well with distraction, even though we spend a lot of time distracting or being distracted. That's part of being human and part of being in a digital world. When we talk about productivity, I'm going to start with this slide. How do you define it? Megan, you're coming in with questions. Others here too, or how do you define productivity, or what concerns do you have about productivity? And how do you measure your success? When you end your day, how do you measure your day in terms of productivity?
Yeah, I can answer that. I'm very much a check off the list kind of person. I've always got lists going, and I measure my productivity in two ways. One, the amount of time I spent since I work for myself with my Discovery Destination, and I run my own online business. I track my time with my Discovery Destination and the amount of tasks I was able to do. And then for my own business, I have a different way of tracking. It's I'm an online retailer, so it's sales. So
makes sense.
Two different things going, and I just always want to get to the end of my task list so I can just relax at the end of the day. And I'm also single and an empty nester, so I could spend 24 hours a day working, but I don't.
That pull can be there though, right?
It is there.
Yes.
It is so there. And when my brain turns to mush in the evening, I will usually either get offline or switch tasks, something mindless, but I do make sure I get my sleep and my exercise in. So there's that. But that's how I rate my productivity. One of those three ways.
Very common, very common. Anyone else? This is no pressure here. I just like to open up the floor in case somebody wants to jump in. Okay, we'll just keep carrying on. I'm going to flip back to this slide. Megan, the task to do approach is, I think, probably the most common. If we were going to, we've got a chat, hang on. A productive day, Catherine says, for us is when everything that needed to be done got done, even if it needs to be redone later. I think many of us can relate to that one. In our culture, we have a focus on doing. If you're in the workaday world and you're at a conference or some event and you're sitting around the lunch table with people you've never met, very often the initial question will be, what do you do? Or if you've just met someone for the first time, what do you do? For those of you who are stay-at-home parents and you have a division of labor and a spouse comes home from work, I don't know what your experience is like, but so often when I was a young mom, I would get, so what did you do today? And I would often just kind of look at my husband with this blank and exasperated look, like, I can't even answer that question, but I have been going all day. I couldn't necessarily give a list but I knew that I had been immersed in my life as a mom.
Michelle,
And yes,
can I share something really funny about what you just said?
of course.
I heard a short story one time about a husband who came home from work. The kids were half dressed running around outside. The door was wide open. There was a trail of clothes and food from the entryway all the way up the hall, all the way up the stairs to where the bedrooms were. And the husband was like, well, where's my wife? Something must have happened. Walks in the house, follows the trail, finds her in her room, sitting on the bed reading. And he's like, what happened? I thought something had happened to you. The kids are all over, the house is a disaster. And she says, those things that every day you ask me what I've done all day. She says, today I didn't do them.
Oh, yes, I have heard that. And Catherine's saying, I get that question from my school kids too. They're coming from a place where they're getting things done in that more of a checklist mode. But being a mom is more of this state of being often, just going with the flow of what it means to take care of children all day. I'm hoping that by the time we are done with this, that perhaps you might think about productivity just a little bit differently. Not that to-dos aren't important. Of course, we have to get things done. But how we measure and how we define an approach. There's some interesting ideas that have had an impact on me. I'll be interested to see what you think. Okay, so the first section of tips is around this idea of practicing productivity from the inside out. Again, going back to our model of values-centered digital wellness, starting there. But I'm actually going to start with a quote from The Social Dilemma. And one of the concerns that was expressed by one of the experts in that documentary, people were talking about how we are the product of social media. When social media are free, when these tools are free, or even search engines or Gmail, these free tools have a price, and that price is our attention. We've talked about this a little bit. And in a sense, we are the product, because our time and our lives are being paraded on these tools, and whatever activities on those tools is what motivates the advertisers to pay the tech companies. So we are the currency, our attention, our eyeballs, our time, our involvement. And one of the experts says that it isn't even that we are the product. He said it's the gradual, slight, imperceptible change in our behavior and perception that is the product. I don't know if any of you have experienced this, but I have noticed that if I'm in a group where there's a certain energy or tone, that can impact me. That if I'm immersed in a world online, be it a discussion or a group, or that can really start to impact me and my life. And so we want to be sure that when we are choosing how to use our time, that we're doing that because we want to, not because of this imperceptible change that can be, really kind of infiltrating our minds and lives and time. Okay, so I'm sure you've seen this or a version of one of these kinds of activities, but what's your first impression? What is the first thing you see when you look at this?
I saw a vase, sort of.
That's what I see as well first. Catherine says she sees the cup as well. Anyone else? Okay, keep that in mind. We'll be coming back to it.
I thought of a goblet.
A goblet, yeah. So most of us are seeing the black form in the middle, right? And okay, so what's the other thing that is there?
There are two faces pointing toward each other, and I was able to see it really quickly, but I saw the black goblet first.
And my eyes keep, okay, I want to see the faces, but it's kind of like the black keeps taking over, you know? That's my experience. Everybody has a little different experience with these perception things, but there are two things there. We know this. In our first discussion, we talked about starting with our center. And I wanted to bring in the expanded version of these slides, there will be more detail, but for ease of presentation, I just simplified. James Clear is a voice, a name you might have heard. He's the 1% change guy. He wrote the book Atomic Habits, and he uses this simplified model that says we can either approach our habits and change by looking at outcomes, which is the what, by looking at processes, which is the how, and by looking at identity, which is the who. And if you are with us in our first discussion, this is similar to what we talked about. We invited you to do a values activity focusing on the who, on who you want to be. He says some people may start with outcomes and then they can reframe that and say, I am the type of person who gets those kind of outcomes. So we're going to do another brief, this will just be a reflection activity here as you think about, like, at your core, who do you want to be? If you were to fill in this, I am the type of person who, with your current, the things that are currently pressing on you in terms of your own personal growth, and wanting to stay centered in your life, how would you fill out that sentence? Does anybody want to share? And it doesn't necessarily have to be just one thing. I think often we're thinking about different things that we're wanting to work on. Anyone? Okay, we'll keep that in mind as we go through this. In the first discussion, we talked about clarifying, taking the time to write. So can you see the face better here than perhaps in the first image? Or how about now, as we start to add a little bit more definition, or even just a few little curvy lines? Can you see better?
Definitely.
Where does your eye go?
Yeah, much better.
As we articulate and get more clear about who, I chose this image because it has an image of a person, the who. If we spend the time, like we talked about, Kelly McGonigal talked about the value of 10 minutes of writing. There are different ways that we can center and recenter on our values when it comes to productivity and how we use our time. This is so powerful. And in fact, Nir Eyal talks about turning values into time, starting with our values and then figuring out how to manage our time. So this idea of starting with our values is not unique. Epik didn't make this up. It shows up with many people in this space of habit change and of wellness, digital wellness, and deliberate intentional living. So round one of our tips are going to focus on nurturing our values and turning values into time. So we'll talk about starting small, honoring crossroad moments, practicing single tasking, and trying time boxing. So first of all, starting small. James Clear, this is James Clear again. He says, decide the type of person you want to be. So I am the type of person who, fill in the blanks, and then prove it to yourself with small wins. So his point is, if we focus just, I'm going to go back, in fact, if we focus just on outcomes, he said, this isn't bad. This isn't a matter of good or bad, but about the direction and the longevity of our goal setting, if you will, that if we focus just on what we want to get done, we're going to have an outcomes focus. But if we focus on who we want to be, more motivation can emerge from that because we're going deeper. We're not just managing the branches of our lives, but getting more to the roots. This sometimes can be called the as-if principle. He says, in fact, to worry less about the results and more about the process. That especially when you're trying to expand and change your habits and expand your thought about who you want to be, that as we engage in small win activities or outcomes, focusing more on the outer ring, as we focus with small wins, we can reinforce and kind of convince our mind and body that, yeah, I'm serious about this. I'm serious about being a person who is committed to becoming more, fill in the blank with your value. This can relate to something called the as if principle. So acting as if something is real, even if it's not yet built into your character. And your habits. And Epik has also discovered that this principle of starting with small wins also works with long-term collaborative work. This was a principle that changed how Epik approached its work. So one of the ways that I find and identify true principles is that they can apply across many different settings. So this is a powerful principle to start small. As you think about a value, perhaps from the first writing activity in the first week, or in this concept of James Clear, I am the type of person who I want to become. Do any small wins come to mind that you could try or are trying?
Are you wanting us to share one?
Yes.
Yeah. Small wins. Okay. Trying to be more organized with my time, and I'll start my video. And I sat down at the beginning of the week for the last 3 weeks in a row, and I have scheduled out certain activities and how much time I'll spend on them. And I've been pretty good at sticking with it. So there's a small win for me.
That's awesome. So committing to certain amounts of time. Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah. And
Great.
I was trying to get up earlier too. When I like to get up and down with the sun, and when it's dark in the morning, I don't want to get out of bed, but I've been trying to just get up at 6 anyway and go to bed at a decent time, before 11, but getting up anyway, I'm getting better. It's getting better. Small wins.
Small wins.
Yeah.
He talks about 1% improvement, small wins.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
Well, I've had a small win this morning. I've been without power and without internet, and I've smiled my way through it, figured out how to get the internet going. I actually went out and shoveled snow, which is for the first time in 3 years or maybe 13 years since I married Rick, and just kind of accepted life. Now, I wasn't totally without internet, so maybe that made it a little bit easier. But the fact that I'm smiling and managing through it is a huge win for me.
I was going to say, that's not small.
Yeah, that's pretty huge that I didn't just totally freak out and be very angry and upset.
It can be
I just smiled and took life in as it was.
life on life's terms. That is a big
Yep.
win. Way to go. Thank you for sharing. And welcome. We're so glad you're able to join us. Sounds like you had quite a day.
Yep.
Okay, small or large wins, right? Okay, here's tip number 2. Honor crossroads moments with yourself and your people. So Megan, you hinted to this about wanting to be deliberate about how you begin and end your day, and honoring awake time, when you wake up, and bedtime. And what happens between when we get up and when we go to bed is what defines so much of our day, right?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
When it comes to honoring time, crossroads with ourselves, especially with how we start and end our day, and how we take breaks through the day, how we care for ourselves through the day, physically, mentally, emotionally, socially, and crossroads moments with other people. In the wellness communities, of course, they talk about mealtime. I know that you've talked about this in terms of the power of mealtime with prevention science, with comings and goings of family members. These moments can add a great deal of value to our day. And so if we had time, I would show a little video clip that had a tremendous impact on me as a mom. But basically the idea, it was from an author whose name is Toni Morrison, I believe, if I'm remembering her name correctly, that when a child enters the room, to have our face communicate how happy we are to see them. Because often we're in task mode, are your shoes tied? Is your hair brushed? Whatever. Do you have your homework? But to use those crossroad moments to focus on the person and to have our face light up. She just challenges us to do that. And that can make a huge difference in the nurturing of children. Tip number 3. This one is not easy, but so powerful: to practice single tasking. Okay. Oh, we've got a chat. Hang on. Yes, I will share the link of, in fact, yeah,
Linda, you read my mind.
I'm almost tempted just to do it. I will share the link in the with Megan as she shares out the resources.
Do share that link depending on the video itself. If you play it within our video, we may have problems uploading.
I know that's the other challenge is sometimes Zoom is kind of testy with video. So
and YouTube too. So we put our replays on YouTube, and it could cause a problem. So share the link, and I will share that.
Share the link. So just keep that in mind. Okay, single tasking. I'm just going to ask for show of hands, how many of us deal with the temptation to multitask? Okay, show of hands or in the chat. This is right. I doubt there's a person on the planet, at least in Western society, guilty, Catherine says, that doesn't deal with the temptation to multitask. I'm here to tell you, multitasking is a myth. It actually slows us down. It increases stress. It reduces productivity. And it's hard to believe because we get kind of a dopamine rush from multitasking, but it is not accomplishing what we think it is accomplishing. It actually risks slowing us down and making it harder for us to honor time and to accomplish what we want to accomplish. So if there is one challenge I would like to issue this week, it is to practice single tasking, even 5 minutes at a time, or single tabbing on your computer or phone to close everything down but the thing you're working on. Single tasking can help reduce stress, build brain's ability to focus, boost creativity, and increase productivity. I think I've shared this before, but I loved what a participant in a brain plasticity course that I'm taking said after the challenge to single task. She said, "This may sound kind of strange, but single tasking feels like taking a walk in the forest." The impact that it can have on mental health and even physical health with at first it can feel like it increases stress, but if you practice it on a regular basis, it can make a difference. I'd be so interested if others of you can experience what those of us who have tried this can experience. And to expand on the concept of single tasking, there is you could call it a time management system, but it's again, more than that. It's values driven. It's called time boxing. Nir Eyal talks about scheduling your values. You've heard perhaps the idea of putting the big rocks in the jar first, starting with the things that are most important and the things that are most difficult. If we start with the things that need the most energy because they're difficult, or the things to which we want to dedicate the most energy, put those on the calendar first and be sure you block off the time for them. It's like what Dave Ramsey says about budgeting money. He says, tell your money where to go based on your values and priorities. The time boxing is like having like his envelope system. He has an envelope system for money. Time boxing is like the envelope system for time. These are some images of how, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, big Dave Ramsey fan here, and I was gonna read you a couple of things that Shirley said about multitasking in the chat, which are kind of funny.
Great.
She says I really think I used to be able to multitask, but as I've gotten older, I absolutely cannot multitask, not at all. I can't even talk and type at the same time. I used to be able to play the organ without mistakes, keep an eye on the baby, and carry on a conversation, but those days are gone.
Yes, I suppose the age may have something to do with it, but even back when we were trying to do this as young mothers, it has a degradation effect. There's a point of diminishing returns that's really sooner in the process of multitasking than we think. So this isn't just for those who are getting older. Multitasking has costs for all of us. So time boxing, this was one of the really impactful takeaways for me from the course, the training course that we received. And what struck me, I mean, you can see from the images what it's about. It's about blocking off time, but not just to-dos. He's talking about scheduling, planning by input, not by the desired output. It's not that you can't plan to-dos, but being sure that as you're planning the things that matter most. And I loved how he talked about measuring. He said, instead of measuring, check, what I get done, he talks about measuring this way. Did I do what I said I would do for as long as I said I would, without distractions? So this does relate to that single tasking idea, keeping the brain focused and committed to one thing and doing what it takes. We'll talk a little bit later about reducing distractions, but being committed to the amount of time that you've chosen to spend. And when I've done this, I can feel the impact it makes on my brain, because I'm not jumping from here to there and flipping tasks and losing time. It's a little bit like defragging. If you've done a defrag on a computer and you see the results of clustering things together more, when we're multitasking or task switching, we're fragmenting our brain and our time. To honor time, we can cluster it and streamline it and reduce the distractions. Be sure to schedule rest and relaxation too, not just throughout your day, but vacations or other things, and honor that time that you schedule. Be committed to it. There's a sense of integrity as well when we take this approach.
Yeah, there's another comment from Shirley. Can I read it really quick?
Yes, please.
If I get the things that I have to do done during the day first, I feel like I've accomplished a ton that day. If I accomplish a ton of little stuff, but don't get the have to things done, I feel like my day got away from me.
Yes, that's like the defrag. And measuring what really matters. Like if you finish the day, and I'm thinking of the young moms again, if you can finish a day, not necessarily even being able to look at the things you've done, but have you been consistent with who you want to be in what you've been doing in your home? It's a different way to think about, did I spend the time on the things that matter most and that connect to who I want to be? This continuum helps me think about honoring time. We can easily be distracted or fragmented, like Shirley just talked about, or kind of dabble shallowly in random, little to-dos, branches if best. Time boxing allows us to dedicate more time for deep work, for creativity, for connection, and the things that matter most. And there's also the flip side, that we can get so far in to deep work that we might lose touch with the world around us too. So that's a continuum to keep in mind. And if you're looking for a fun family activity, watching Soul could be an option. Yes, please.
So I have a question, and not to be difficult, but so here's a question for you. So in my situation, I have a team that relies on me a lot. Okay. I mean, they need my response for them to do what they're doing. So
I understand this. Yes.
I find myself, okay, so I love to go into that, that deep dive and I mean, I have my tasks as well that, yeah, I would love to be able to say, okay, I am going to spend this hour or this 2 hours just, working on this project. But I have to be available so that my team can, and they come at different times. I mean, that's just the nature of the way we work. So, I mean, it's not like I can set up office hours and say, hey, I'm available, at these times. I mean, there are times when Megan's doing her work, if she needs an answer from me, then I want to be able to answer that so that she can go on with her work. If, Tori needs something, if Melissa needs something, so I find that yeah, my day is very, very fragmented depending on what the team needs. And I know that it takes time. I mean, when I get interrupted, sometimes it takes me, 3-4 minutes just to find what I was working on again.
Okay.
I feel like I need to be there for my team. What do you recommend?
I'm going to get to the set. It is such a great question, especially when you are managing a team. I have two thoughts with that. One is this idea of what's called the Pomodoro Technique, which is a version of time boxing, but it breaks it down into 25-minute chunks. And one of the reasons that they do it is they say, pretty much anything can wait for 25 minutes. So even if you could chunk some uninterrupted time at a 25-minute interval, you might find a little bit less defragging, okay? A little less fragmentation. And so there is one tip. The other, I'm going to go ahead and skip, it's actually the next topic. So we are going to take a brief blink and breathe break. I'm getting to your question. It's right around the corner.
Okay.
So 20 seconds. I'm setting a timer. Take 20 seconds to stare 20 feet away and just pay attention to your blinking and your breathing. We're covering a lot as usual. Okay. All right. So to answer your question, the second round is on reducing distractions. We're, trying to reduce the fragmentation. And the first thing on the list is to create communication charter. So this would be the other suggestion that I would make, is to work with your team to find out what tools are their preferred mode for communication, and to discuss times of day to where you can possibly create. I understand the goal to be available. In fact, as I was trained in business and I was trained to be available and responsive, these are really important values. Clearly, at least the way that I interpret it, when you say the type of person I want to be is a responsive, available person to be able to support my team. Is that a fair interpretation of one of your values?
Yeah, absolutely. And I want them to be able to make the best use of their time. And so in order to do that, I want to be able to give them answers when they need them so that they're not waiting on me.
Okay. So my suggestion would be to use this tool of create a communications charter to be able to have a team discussion about who uses what tools, what are your preferences for tools, preferred contact hours, and how you interact with each other when there is a critical need, for example. And if it is possible to be able to do something like a Pomodoro wait on a critical need so it's possible to perhaps create some crossover and some streamlining in terms of contact with you, because your availability certainly adds value to the team, but the fragmentation hurts the team as a team leader, because if your energy is fragmented, it will impact the team, right? And so that would be one of the tools I would recommend fiddling with, is working together as a team to see if you can bring a little more of a time boxed idea to an office hours concept, and expectations in terms of reciprocity, for how what's the expected delay. If they call it a time, for example, when you're in the middle of something, I'll get back to you within a half an hour or a certain amount of time, so that they know that they can rely on a response, but also giving yourself permission to have space so that you aren't being fragmented too much yourself as a leader. Is that helpful at all?
Yeah. Yep, I'll try that out. I'll
It's
discuss.
it's a team effort. It's a team effort to come together and commit to helping each other, so that everyone can maximize their time the best way possible. And this is something that can be used in the family as well. So we have a link that will also go out with Megan, for being able to fill out. This is a Google Doc that you can fill out. You could fill it out for a team or for a family. I'm going to let you review the email things on your own, because wow, the time has really flown today. Megan, are we okay going for a few more minutes?
Absolutely.
Okay. We've had a lot of really great discussion. Thank you for your participation. If you were to fill in this blank, the opposite of distraction is, what would you fill in that blank?
Catherine said focus.
That's exactly what most people say. Yes. And it's not untrue. Nir Eyal reframes this a little bit differently. He says the opposite of distraction is traction. I really like thinking about it this way, because instead of just, I'm going to focus on something, it's traction, again, tied to your values. And a value-centered approach makes it easier to define what distraction is. You can't call something a distraction unless you know what it's distracting you from. So by defining, this is the person I want to be, this is how I want that person to show up in my day, then you can start to understand the distraction. The reason I chose this image in art, the negative space, so in this case, I'm going to call the vase the negative space. The negative space is the space around and between the desired object of attention. So the more clearly we define our desired who we want to be, our desired who and what and why, the easier it is to understand what distractions are in our lives. So again, if we had more time, we'd watch this little clip from Up. This is a fun way to engage children around this idea. But Doug is known for, being very happy and very loving unless there's a squirrel. And then he's gone. Dogs are known for, if they catch something in their scent, they can just disappear. So as you think about your value-centered, this will be a personal reflection activity that you can do on your own, but to consider one or two of your distractions, those things that keep you from the traction that you want around what matters most. This is the last tip I'll review. The others are ones that you'll need to spend some time on, but creating more friction. So when you think about friction, you think, I'm running my hands together, creating friction. Oh, there's some heat I'm creating as I rub them together. In the wellness world, friction is created not by bringing things together, but by actually creating distance between them. So in this case, I'm the type of person, this is, an example. I am the type of person who takes care of her body. So how would she create friction with that donut? Get it further away, create more barriers between herself and the donut so that she's focusing on the apple. We've already talked about different ways we can create friction internally by stopping and creating a little bit of distance to observe what we're feeling. If you do meditation and you've ever experienced the wandering mind, we can notice it and, oh, it's wandering. I'm going to bring it back instead of just letting the mind slide all over ice without any friction. We can interject friction through attention. And like we talked about last week by Jan, you talked about the value of reframing stress. That's another way to insert friction internally. Here's one more video link. I will show you this. The way he describes it is so simple, but the digital world is created to be frictionless. So they want to reduce the barriers for you. So endless scroll is an example of a frictionless element of technology, or if you're on YouTube and the continual, what do they call autoplay? That's an example of frictionless technology. So how can you insert friction in technology? Turn off things like autoplay. Close down tabs so that other distractions, whatever you're working on, work on that and close down other tabs so that there are a few steps between you and those distractions. And we can create friction physically. In the case of the apple and the donut, either don't have the donut in the house at all or have the donut somewhere where you have to do a little work to get to it. When it comes to our digital spaces, if you have bills and other to-dos surrounding your computer, it'll be easier to be distracted versus having a clean work area. And this can be true if you're spending time with people you want to be spending with. Spend time in an area where you aren't visually being distracted by other things that make you want to be doing something else. These last two things of saying no to defaults and increasing privacy settings are, I've got lists of ways that you can reduce notifications and lists of ways that you can increase privacy. So obviously this isn't something we discuss here, but these lists, if you review the slide deck, I'll also have a Google Doc that I'll send to Megan that has these in it. The more we increase or reduce notifications and increase privacy protection, the less friction. The more we increase friction, the less frictionless access to technology we have. And all of these, so there are things we can do to manage inside and things we can do to manage our world outside to help us honor our time better. So this time, I think out of all of the weeks, this time went the fastest for me. Thank you for giving us a little extra time to go through this.
Not a problem. It's a topic I was really looking forward to.
I hope something today was valuable. Your invitations for the coming week again are to go through the digital wellness survey. You'll notice that we didn't go through the productivity section. That is in the bonus material, the first thing in the bonus material right there. And the invitation is to review the slides and find one honoring time tip you want to try this week, and or review the slides for one activity to do with someone else or to discuss with someone else. And as always, we wish you well. Any thoughts or questions? Shirley, I'd love to brainstorm with you more. Your question is so important. And I don't know if what I shared answered, but I would encourage you to work with your team so that they can help you be responsive while also being supportive of time boxing that you need to do for your own work to be able to serve yourself and them better.
Yeah, thank you. Great suggestions and we'll get something figured out. Because I have been very aware, I mean, since doing this, actually the first, session that I did, it does, it takes time away. When I'm doing things, it takes me several minutes to get back to it.
Well, and again, you can measure as you look at your day, the fact that you are living a value of being responsive and caring about your people is, how do you define success, right? That there's another way to look at it is you are being successful because you're responding to that value. And so it's balancing this idea of to-dos versus to be. Who do you want to be, and how this all unfolds? Does it match who you want to be, even if you may get fewer things done? Or do you need to tweak the balance so that, you can also feel like you're able to stay on top of the things you need to do?
Yeah. Thank you. Great discussion.
Any other thoughts or questions before we finish up?
So we had, okay. I'm just looking at the chat, and there's a chat going back and forth about getting the extra material, the slides and things like that. Yes. I usually within 24 hours, I post the replay video and any other material that Michelle sends with me in our Facebook communities. If you are not sure which Facebook community you should join, you can go to mydiscoverydestination.com/communities, and there's links in there. You choose where you live and it'll send you to the right group.
I also, if you want to put, Linda, I have your email address, so I could send it to you. But if anybody wants to be included on an email list, I could also, as a backup to what Megan shares on their websites, I can send out an email with the information as well.
And it's easier to find the communities, I should have thought of this, at discoverfamily.fun than it is to go to the other one I gave you.
There we go. There it is in the
Yep, it's in the chat. Okay. Anybody else have questions or comments for Michelle or anybody else before we end today's session? Great.
Thanks everyone for being here.
Thank you. This is awesome. And I can't believe we're halfway through it either. So 4 more weeks.
Four more weeks.
Craziness. And it'll be Thanksgiving. It'll be crazy. All right. See everybody later. I'm going to end the recording and we'll see you next week.
Thanks so much.